Good morning. Good to have you with us on this Friday. I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is on assignment. We begin this hour with a new escalation in President Trump's global trade war. At midnight, new tariffs went into effect. They range from 10 to 12.5%, and they target 60 countries. That includes key trading partners like the European Union and China. They're replacing the president's temporary 10% levy, which expired overnight. So what's the Trump administration's rationale for imposing these new duties, especially after the Supreme Court struck down the president's most sweeping tariff strategy earlier this year? Well, this time the White House is saying the tariffs are meant to punish countries for lax enforcement of forced labor laws. But most of the trading partners, well, they strongly reject that accusation. In a few moments, we'll speak with Investopedia's editor-in-chief and chief business editor of People Inc., Caleb Silver. First, let's bring in NBC News Washington correspondent Alice Barr. Alice, good morning. So tell us, how do these new tariffs work? Why do some countries get 10%, others 12.5%?
Yeah, good morning, Joe. The Trump administration is using a different justification for these tariffs under a section of the 1974 Trade Act because, as you just laid out, the Supreme Court ruled that the Trump administration could not use that Emergency Powers Act they had last relied on, that overstepped the president's authority. So a U.S. Trade Representative fact sheet is now laying out that trading partners that they say have made commitments to adopt and effectively enforce forced labor import prohibitions will have that 10% tariff, while those that failed to do so will have the 12.5% tariff rate. So that's the difference, as they're framing it, of course, over very loud objections.
So recapping this, the Trump administration trying to justify this by arguing these places failed to impose and enforce bans on goods made with forced labor. As we mentioned, most of these trading partners dispute that allegation. How did the U.S. come to this conclusion? Can we expect any sort of retaliation from these countries?
Yeah, the U.S. Trade Representative's office said that it spent months investigating these other countries' trade practices and found that these 60 trading partners were not measuring up. The investigation began in mid-March. That's not long after the Supreme Court ruling that sent the administration looking for other tariff options. And yes, the countries are pushing back. The European Union's foreign policy chief said that the EU has stronger labor laws than in the U.S. As for retaliation, Brazil is among those facing a 12.5% tariff, which it called arbitrary and unjustified, and said in a statement it's moving toward retaliatory tariffs against the U.S. and also filing a legal complaint with the World Trade Organization.
So, Alice, amid the backdrop of the Iran war and these soaring fuel prices we've been seeing, there are some exemptions to these tariffs, right? Walk us through those.
Yeah, there are key exceptions on fertilizers and on oil and gas. Those products we know have been particularly hard hit by the choke point in the Strait of Hormuz throughout the war with Iran. And we have seen the effects of rising oil and gas prices and the challenges farmers have faced on fertilizer with the trickle-down impacts on food prices. Some foods are also exempted, with the fact sheet citing those that cannot be grown or produced in sufficient quantities in the U.S. or gotten elsewhere. Autos, metals, and pharmaceuticals also exempt. And President Trump announced separately this week that all generic drugs being brought into the U.S. will continue to be tariff-free for 2 years.
So, Alice, just what does this tell us about how the president's tariff policy is evolving, especially in the wake of that big Supreme Court decision? Are there any other methods we could expect in the coming months?
Yeah, so again, we know the administration has been searching around for alternative methods to levy tariffs since the Supreme Court rulings. President Trump has frequently said tariffs are essential to his economic policy, pointing to the money they bring in for the federal government, even though, remember, it's American companies bearing the brunt of those costs on the goods and materials they import, and then in some cases passing them down to consumers. And if we see prices rise further on the backs of these tariffs, that's going to be tough for Republicans to swallow heading into the midterms when prices are the central issue. But tariffs are also a huge part of President Trump's foreign policy and how he negotiates with other countries to get what he wants for the United States, something that he does not want to give up power and control over.
All right, Alice Barr in Washington. Alice, thank you so much. Let's get some analysis now with our Caleb Silver. So when it comes to just the economic impact of these, is this basically just a continuation of what expired at midnight? Is it same old, same old?
In a way, 10 to 12.5% is not that big of a jump. But if you're a small business and you're importing $10 million worth of imported goods, that 2.5% means a lot. But if you're a consumer thinking about a bottle of wine that was $25, that's now $26.50, not a huge deal. So not a huge deal in terms of consumer prices, but the overall impact is higher prices. You add that to higher energy prices. Energy prices continue to rise, now escalating because of the renewed conflict in the Strait of Hormuz. Then you just have higher prices all around. And as Al has mentioned, a lot of these prices are passed on to the consumer. About 60% of them hit our wallets.
Yeah, and I want to ask about that because obviously it's unclear right now if other countries are going to retaliate. Yeah. That could escalate the price tag on all of these things. But right now, from a consumer perspective, will we see many dramatic price changes in what we pay for goods?
You won't. You'll see them in things like apparel. You'll see them in things like electronics. But the price increase won't be that significant based on what we've already seen. So I wouldn't expect to see a huge jump in inflation across those types of consumer goods. But the overall impact of this is higher prices, and higher prices mean inflation for everyone, and what matters next to the Federal Reserve, which is going to be looking at interest rates very soon.
We'll talk about that in a moment. First, though, let's talk about the market reaction. I know yesterday, not a good day on Wall Street. Is that because of the tariff issues, or is that still mostly focused on what's happening in Iran and what's happening with oil prices?
Yes, that has everything to do with oil prices. Right. You get Brent crude prices at $100 a barrel. That's very difficult to pass through the supply chain and not have an impact there. So you have that going on. Plus, you have earnings season right now. We're hearing from the big tech companies. Everyone wants to hear about more and more spending on AI. We didn't hear that much good news last night. That's why you had a big sell-off yesterday. Today, markets reacting a little bit better, bouncing back a little bit. Sometimes you see this where investors sort of sell the rumor, buy the news. That's kind of what we're seeing today. We knew this was coming. It's not as bad as a lot of people thought. Markets reacting in kind.
You mentioned the Federal Reserve, which meets in?
Yeah, 5 days, 6 hours, and 52 minutes. I'm not counting, you're counting, but they're probably not going to touch interest rates because they don't know how long these higher energy prices are going to stay in place. But I would look out to September 16th. That's the next meeting after this one. Right now, there's a 58% chance, if you look at the CME FedWatch tool, that the Fed will have to raise rates to combat inflation. A raise in interest rates right now could be very punishing for Americans who are dealing with high interest rates and dealing with high inflation.
But the main argument for that would be?
Got to control inflation, and that's one way to do it.
All right, Caleb Silver, good to have you with us. Thank you so much. President Trump is threatening to intensify the military strikes against Iran. Newly released video from Central Command reports to show the U.S. striking communication networks and storage facilities overnight. Now Iranian allies are targeting ships in the Red Sea, and that is sending those gas prices higher here at home. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel has the latest.
The U.S. war on Iran is intensifying and expanding as President Trump says major combat operations could resume soon.
We want to get it over with, and we want to do it right, but we have to do what we came to do.
For the 12th straight day, the U.S. attacked Iranian military sites. U.S. Central Command released footage of the operations, while Iran says civilian locations are being hit as well. CENTCOM also put out an edited video set to electronic music showing its newly reimposed naval blockade of Iranian ports. Iran has responded to every American attack with missile and drone strikes on U.S. bases and American troops in the Middle East, killing at least 4 soldiers in the past week. And now one of Iran's allies has opened a second front, widening the war and rattling markets. For 5 months, the U.S. and Iran have battled for control of the Strait of Hormuz, passageway for 20% of the world's oil and gas. The Houthis in Yemen, an Iranian-backed militia, say they attacked 2 Saudi ships in the Red Sea to the west. 12% of all global trade passes through the Red Sea. International oil prices jumped to over $100 a barrel for the first time since May. President Trump told Axios and Israeli media he's considering a massive attack on Iran, bigger than ever before, because Iran hasn't received enough pain yet. But the president is also facing more political challenges. 4 Republicans in the House of Representatives joining Democrats in a symbolic vote to direct the president to remove armed forces from hostilities with Iran.
The Israeli government is preparing for an escalation. The government today opening shelters to the public in several cities. And Israel's defense minister said that if Iran attacks Israel, it will receive a devastating blow.
All right, Richard, thank you. There is a major development in the legal battle between the Department of Justice and New York Times. The DOJ has now agreed to withdraw its subpoenas of reporters from the Times. Those subpoenas were issued after the journalists reported on security concerns with the new Air Force One. The whole situation has raised concerns about the First Amendment, with the newspaper promising to fight back. For more, let's bring in NBC News legal affairs reporter Gary Grumbach in Washington. Gary, good morning. Before we get to that story, I want to talk about something we just heard there from Richard Engel. That was the 4 Republicans in the House joining Democrats yesterday in a symbolic vote to direct the president remove troops from the war with Iran. Who were those 4 Republicans? Where could things go from here?
Yeah, Joe, if you feel like we've had this conversation before, it's because we have. There have been 13 votes in the United States Senate for this, 5 different votes in the United States House for this. And in the House yesterday, 4 Republicans joined all the Democrats in voting for the measure. They were Congressman Massey, Congressman Barrett of Ohio, who is a retired Army officer, Congressman Davidson, who is a retired military officer, and Congressman Fitzpatrick, who's a former intel officer. So all these folks having some sort of military background is certainly an interesting thing here. The Senate also voted on a war powers resolution yesterday. It failed for the 11th time.
All right, let's get to the New York Times case. The Justice Department now withdrawing those subpoenas of journalists over their reporting about Air Force One. Gary, why did the government change course here? Does this mean the matter is over? Where do things go now?
Well, it's all because a federal judge really questioned them really hard yesterday in court in New York City about why they jumped to subpoenas. Subpoenas are a very aggressive investigatory tactic. There's a whole lot of things the Department of Justice could have done before subpoenaing journalists. And the judge really dialed in on that and said, this is a serious First Amendment issue. There are serious chilling factors for the reporters themselves that need to be considered here. And the judge was clear this record is replete with bad faith, he said. And one other issue was the sloppiness that appeared from the prosecutors at the Department of Justice. They obtained phone records of family members of the reporters because they were just looking in a public database for phone numbers and got the wrong ones. Joe?
Gary, finally, the Supreme Court may not be in session right now, but Justice Elena Kagan is making some headlines for comments she made about the court's role yesterday. She was at a talk in Washington State. What did she say?
Yes, she's pushing back on the idea that the Supreme Court, even though it is a 6-3 ideologically conservative majority, is a rubber stamp for Donald Trump. She pointed to some of the biggest decisions of the entire term this past year, including on tariffs and on birthright citizenship, where the court ruled against Donald Trump and ruled in favor of the plaintiffs in those cases. Kagan's comments, though, come as the trust in the Supreme Court is at historic lows, and we've seen that because of some of the emergency orders that get put across the Supreme Court's desk without any full explanation as to why they're making the decisions they are. Joe?
All right, Gary Grumbach in Washington. Gary, thank you so much. A new controversy is brewing at the Secret Service. An agent on Vice President J.D. Vance's detail has been removed and is under investigation over allegations of putting the VP's security at risk. NBC News Chief Justice and National Affairs correspondent Kelly O'Donnell has more.
A Secret Service agent has been removed from the protective detail around Vice President J.D. Vance. Officials said a review is underway, writing, "Any conduct that potentially threatens the safety of a protectee will not be tolerated." A source familiar with the investigation says it follows a report by MS Now, describing some agents as fed up with last-minute travel and changing schedules. One issue involved a helicopter trip where Vance planned to take his son to a golf lesson at Joint Base Andrews. Bad weather scrubbed the flight. An administration official says use of Marine 2 by Vance and his young family is done for operational security and can reduce manpower and road closures required for motorcades. All while the threat environment is alarmingly high. The Secret Service has more than 10,000 threat investigations since January, up 40% over this time last year.
They're off the charts. I think the environment has become very volatile, and that's just across the board.
Threats that include a would-be assassin breaching a checkpoint, gunfire, setting off chaos at the White House Correspondents' Dinner in April. Kelly O'Donnell, NBC News.
And now the focus does shift to tonight's rescheduled White House Correspondents' Dinner, where President Trump is expected to speak, as Kelly just referenced in her report there. The original event was cut short back in April when a gunman ran through that security checkpoint. That man fired at an officer, but then was quickly subdued by authorities. Leaders at the Secret Service say they are prepared for tonight's event, which will be held at a different Washington hotel with a smaller ballroom. This event will also feature fewer guests. We have exclusive new reporting on growing tensions between the White House and the Department of Homeland Security. Two senior officials tell NBC News that some Trump administration leaders seem to be dissatisfied with Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen after a couple public missteps. The most recent incident happened last week. Mullen told ICE agents to pause vehicle stops when pursuing immigrants. That was after two deadly officer-involved shootings during pursuits, one in Texas, one in Maine. President Trump reversed that policy the very next day. This dispute comes as the Trump administration is once again trying to ramp up its mass deportation efforts. NBC News senior Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley joins me now with more on her exclusive reporting. Julia, good morning. Mullen's only been on the job, 4 months now? So tell us more about what your sources are saying about these tensions.
Well, at this stage, it really seems to be kind of an annoyance, something that's been noted by officials within the Trump administration, that especially that incident that you just named from last week, that was not run by the president, which is why Trump quickly reversed that vehicle stop policy, saying that ICE officers could stop people in vehicles even after those two deadly shootings, because Mullen hadn't run that by anyone at the White House. And as this presidency has shown one thing, it's very centralized. No one can do anything without running it by the White House, by the president's chief of staff, and ultimately by the president himself. And so that was seen as a misstep. It also comes after a few other things that have caught the eye of the White House, including when the Supreme Court handed the Trump administration a win by saying that they could revoke the temporary protected status of people from Haiti and Syria. And he came out and said that those people could then just apply to have legal status in the United States, and that was incorrect. The other thing is that he really threw his weight behind a man named Lance Schroyer, who is the nominee to be the new ICE director, and his nomination has still not been scheduled. As we understand it, he's been at DHS headquarters, and people have tried to bring him up to speed on immigration policy because he was an Oklahoma State trooper, someone who's referred to internally as Mullen's guy. And so Trump did support him to be the nominee for ICE, but if he's not ready for that nomination hearing, that could also end up backfiring on Mullen.
So is there any indication at all that President Trump might fire or replace Mullen so early into his tenure here?
You know, I've been thinking about that. I've covered a lot of DHS secretaries being replaced. There were 4 in the first Trump administration, and then, of course, most notably Kristi Noem earlier this year. It doesn't seem that the tea leaves are at that place yet when I'm looking into signs that he might be looking to replace him. Mullen is still being invited, for example, tonight to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I think he's very much still in his job at the moment, but I just think there's some notable tension there, really, and it shows what happens when someone comes in to this job that is such high pressure. When the president has campaigned on mass deportations, his key immigration promises, he wants to keep those numbers high, but he wants to stay out of the headlines. Mullen already had a very thin needle to thread here, and it's a hard job to be in, and I think it's easy to make some of these missteps.
Well, let's talk about those numbers, because amid all this, the Trump administration is still trying to ramp up these mass deportation efforts. The newly released data shows that ICE made tens of thousands of arrests just in June alone. Walk us through some of the new numbers and just what it says about the president's current strategy.
That's right. Well, the numbers really started to ramp up in June, and we're seeing it with more public arrest out in the field. People are seeing this in their communities. I know we've seen very public arrests during the morning rush hour in Washington, D.C. this week. And of course, we saw that very visibly with the videos of the aftermath of the 2 fatal shootings in Houston and Maine. And now we have the numbers to understand what has been happening nationwide. In June, there were nearly 40,000 arrests. That's a significant increase, coming in at about 1,300 a day on average. And that's also increased the number of immigrants in detention, now over 65,000. Now, they don't have the space for that many people, so it's meaning a lot of overcrowding. And oftentimes people are being held while they're still pursuing asylum claims and other routes that could allow them to stay in the United States without being deported. But the Trump administration has really redefined what the criteria is to be held and arrested.
Which begs the question, is this pace sustainable?
Well, if you talk to a lot of ICE agents and officers in the field, it's not sustainable. Many of them say that it's that pressure to get the numbers up, not being able to take any time off when they need it, working 7 days a week. Many of them point to that and the new officers who have been put on the beat very quickly without as much training as previous officers as some of the reasons for these fatal shootings. They say that they need more training and more time off.
Julia Ainsley sharing her latest reporting. Julia, thank you so much. Tensions are mounting in Madison, Wisconsin after a man was shot by police earlier this week. The victim has now been identified as Corey Ruiz. Police say the case is now an open and active homicide investigation. Many in the community are demanding answers, asking why the officers used deadly force. NBC News correspondent Shaquille Brewster has the latest from the scene.
New video capturing the deadly confrontation between Madison, Wisconsin police and Corey Ruiz. Captured on camera in Madison, Wisconsin. A police officer fatally shooting the 38-year-old who investigators say was armed with a knife.
This is an open and active homicide investigation right now.
The scene sparking outrage even at a press conference with city leaders. Multiple videos capturing the incident from different angles. The scuffle appearing to begin here when police say Ruiz falls or is taken off his bike by an officer. Authorities were responding to a report of an individual checking car doors Wednesday afternoon, they say, when the man initially fled. Watch as police appear to struggle with him. They say Ruiz pulled out a knife and injured one officer. Authorities say a taser was deployed, but it was not successful. Then 3 shots are heard.
The officer who sustained injuries from the knife was the same officer that fired the shots.
Public records show Ruiz had at least 40 criminal convictions, including several for resisting or obstructing law enforcement.
You should not lose your life as a result of an encounter with law enforcement.
The shooting leading to a night of demonstrations. Protesters here interrupting an outdoor concert at the state capitol. Jasmine Brown says she knew Ruiz personally.
You've known him for 20 years. What was lost in that shooting?
I mean, a father, a son, a friend, a loved one, and he's gone.
Meanwhile, the police chief saying that there are more videos that the public has not seen at this point, and saying that does not include body camera video from the officers, saying that his officers are not deployed with body-worn cameras, though suggesting that's something that he wants to change in the future. Back to you.
All right, Shaq, thank you. For more on this, let's bring in NBC News law enforcement analyst Jim Kavanaugh. Jim, good to have you with us. Based on what we know so far, what are the biggest questions investigators are going to have to answer to determine whether deadly force was justified here?
Joe, the seminal question, and really the only question, is were the officers in imminent threat of great bodily harm or death? If that's the case, then the use of deadly force by the police is justified. It's really the only question. Past criminal record doesn't even matter. The question is this: were the officers under imminent threat of great bodily harm or death? If so, then deadly force is justified. That's the question the Department of Criminal Investigation will look at, what the district attorney will look at, any grand jury. That's what has to be determined.
So, Jim, at the center of that question, then, is police saying that Ruiz pulled out a knife during the confrontation with officers. From a law enforcement perspective, what can you tell us about how officers are generally trained to handle a situation like that?
Well, you know, a butcher knife that size that the officer was cut with, I mean, one slash of that, one plunge of that, and you're dead. You can't end up in a tie. He's dead and you're dead. That's not what you want if you're the officer. And I think people have, angst over this because Mr. Ruiz is on his side with officers over him, but there's an officer bending over backwards over him. Could he have plunged a knife into the officer's throat that fast? Is that an imminent threat? Could he have slashed the thigh of an officer and cut his ephemeral artery? Is that imminent threat of death or great bodily harm? So it has to be that before the officer can deploy deadly force. And clearly that knife it will kill you quickly. And, even a slash or a plunge, and he still had control of it. If you watch that video through, you'll see the officer who's behind him does take the butcher knife out from in front of him and drop it on the street. So clearly he had it and had control over it. So that'll be the seminal question, Joe.
All right, Jim Kavanaugh, good to have you with us. Thank you so much. This morning, the remnants of Tropical Storm Bertha are moving across Texas. The National Hurricane Center says the storm made its final landfall near Galveston yesterday afternoon, with winds reaching up to 60 miles an hour. Dangerous rip currents and heavy rain were reported along the Gulf Coast. The storm then moved inland, dumping up to 4 inches of rain in just 1 hour, causing some dangerous flash flooding in spots near Houston. More on what you can expect this weekend with the forecast. Angie Lassman joins us now with your morning news, now weather. Angie, good morning.
Hi there, Joe. Good morning to you. We've got a bit of a kind of busy setup for the weekend, some of it including the heat and some including flooding. So let's talk about that. We've got this heat dome that's going to expand over the coming days. It's kind of centered over parts of the west, but notice it builds to include parts of the central United States and the east as we get through at least the weekend and into Monday. We could see temperatures 90s, 100s, anywhere from 10 to 25 degrees above normal for what we usually see. On top of that, we're going to see this kind of other effect from when we have a really strong heat dome. It's this band of thunderstorms that often we call the ring of fire, where you get just enough instability, you get just enough heat and moisture, where you see some of those thunderstorms firing up right along that edge of that heat dome. So we've got the monsoon thunderstorms, and even on Sunday and Monday, we're talking about a severe threat across parts of the Midwest. So we'll watch for that. In the meantime, today, right now, we've got a whole lot of heat alerts up, 67 million people, middle of the country and the western half of the country included in these. As we gear up for, again, 90s and triple digits in a lot of spots. Denver heads to 95 today. Phoenix ends up at 114. We've got milder conditions for now across the Midwest and parts of the Ohio Valley, but we'll kind of moderate out as we get into the weekend and then see those temperatures on the rise beyond that. 104 in Pierre as we get to tomorrow, 94 for Minneapolis, still hanging on to those really summer-like temperatures well into next week if you live across the middle of the country. It's 103 in Dallas on Monday, 106 in Wichita, mid-90s as we begin our next work week in Des Moines, and even those high 90s on Monday in Denver. So still feeling very summer-like, and the heat index values not offering any relief, of course. We've got 107 for what it'll feel like both Monday and Tuesday in Shreveport. So still, again, that kind of late July heat in place. On top of that, over the past couple of days, boy, have we received a lot of rain across the mid-Atlantic, specifically the Carolinas, North Carolina, kind of just stuck in this pattern where the rain has been sticking around. We've got more of that through the day today, and you can see those flood alerts. The flood watches are up across that region and farther to the west. As we still have this stationary front just kind of hanging around, it's going to remain stalled through the day today. That means that more of this kind of showery weather stays with us across those same regions with the already saturated soil. So no surprise that we're concerned about flooding through at least today. That'll stay with us for tomorrow. Again, more of that possible flooding, Joe, across parts of the Carolina coast and the southeast as we head into our weekend.
All right, Angie, thank you so much.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.